So on today's episode of Recruiting Roundtable, we are talking about scaling. Over the past few years, many companies, unfortunately, have either reduced their headcount or paused on hiring. But we are seeing the market start to heat up, especially over here at Rocket. We're definitely seeing that. And so hopefully we're going to see some more high volume hiring across the board in the coming months, and companies scaling like they were, really doing in like 2021 into 2022. Joining us today are two guests who both have experience scaling companies from less than 100 to over 400 within, like a 2 or 3 year window. So that's really impressive. I'm excited to hear some of those stories from both of them. We have Anne Ngo, head of global talent acquisition at Carbon6, and Miles Randle, head of people and talent at Flip. And Miles, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great. All right. So let's do some intros. Please just kind of introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself and your company, and we'll go from there. Let's go Anne first.
Yeah, I'm Anne. I'm the director of talent at Carbon6. I've been pretty much recruiting for the last 10 years, but the last 6-7 years has been dedicated to early stage, high growth scale up startups. Like Sean said, from sub 100 to over 500 employees. Yeah, I've been pretty much leading the talent acquisition function for the last 3-4 years during, the height of expansion when we had the great resignation to the great reshuffle to now, we're seeing a little bit more conservative hiring, just given the macroeconomic climate, but really great seeing kind of the ebbs and flows and how that's really evolved and shaped my career and how I built talent functions from different parts of industries and organizations of all stages and sizes.
Great, thank you, Anne. And fun fact, Anne and I both worked at Ada.
Yes.
She'll talk about that because that was the company that went from 700 to over 500, and our paths crossed a little bit there. I think I was she was coming in, I was coming out, kind of thing at that time, but our paths did cross. So it's great to see us reconnect and all the successes you've had, Anne. So thank you for joining, Miles.
Awesome. So I'm Miles. I'm the head of people and talent at Flip. Flip is voice AI for customer support. So actually, interestingly enough, Ada, I believe, is the founders are one of our investors. I've been in the more specifically New York tech scene for past decade. Started kind of agency and then got into wanting to be in-house and have helped scale companies from different stages, Series A, Series B. Most recently, we actually launched 145 startups over the last 3 years. And so getting back into HR and talent here at Flip.
That's awesome. Thank you, Miles. The Ada family tree grows. It knows no boundaries. And lastly, my name is Sean Huynh. I'm the host of this podcast. I'm also the managing director at Rocket and VP of sales at HireFlow, our sister company. At Rocket, we take a scientific approach to recruiting. We combine our recruiters with our AI model, which we trained over 7 years, and our programmatic sourcing techniques to help our clients find and engage candidates in ways that just aren't possible to do in traditional channels like LinkedIn or others. All right, so let's kind of start from the beginning. I always like to start with this question because a lot of people get into recruiting. They don't necessarily start there, but they kind of get into it. So I'd love to hear how you got into recruiting. Was this something that you came out of school and was like, hey, I want to get into talent acquisition, or was this something you kind of fell into? Maybe we'll start with Anne.
Yeah, funny enough, I actually studied accounting during my academic career to pursue my CPA, which I successfully achieved in 3 years post-university at one of the most reputable Big Four accounting firms. But I was actually pretty miserable during those 3 years. You were typically locked in a room with no windows, like looking at spreadsheets for 12, 15-hour days during busy season. And it was just not for me. And so while I was earning my hours to achieve my designation, I also had to pass every single exam along the way. And I told myself if I failed any of those exams, I would quit because it was just not meant for me. But I didn't fail, unfortunately, at the time.
Of course not. Of course you didn't fail.
I couldn't get myself to do it as well. My parents were refugees, so they sacrificed a lot for me to be where I am today. So once I got my designation, I actually realized I needed to pivot because my happiness was just truly important. So I actually met with a lot of external recruiters who, ironically enough, were ex-CPAs and discovered that this was a career path for me. And so I took a leap of faith. And for the last 10 years, I've never looked back. And I've been recruiting across agencies in-house predominantly within skeleton startups, like I mentioned earlier.
It's interesting. I didn't actually go all the way back to the beginning, but I see auditor at CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, and then KPMG. So definitely sounds like the path of a CPA.
Yeah. I think it does give me some sort of competitive edge because, and Miles, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I do find that having had that background plus agency experience made me a lot more data-driven when it comes to understanding the performance of our talent function as a whole. So I try not to get too deep into numbers because there's obviously some qualitative information that comes out of the experiences that you bring to candidates and why hires are more successful in certain fields or areas than others. But I do appreciate that experience and time in my life, and really glad it got me to where I am today.
Yeah, I was going to say the 12 to 15 hours staring at spreadsheets probably isn't that far off from what you're doing today. Yeah, it's. I would agree. I think having the data analytic background definitely helps in recruiting. To your point, like I'm also not a massive metrics driven person. I mean, you ask me a metric and I can give you the numbers off the top of my head.
Right.
But I think there's a lot, you have to blend both the qualitative and quantitative if you're going to do this successfully.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I would agree with that. So, I mean, you got the mic, Miles. Tell us about your story.
Yeah. So I actually started my kind of working career running my family's HVAC business, so heating and air conditioning, and was more operational. And so figuring out kind of those metrics, the data, all that stuff for the family's business. Decided to go to college, was kind of the first one to graduate from college out of my family. And so actually went for HR. And I was like, I got this operations kind of background. I like people. I want to help people. And so hopped in, did consulting, HR consulting for a small firm with like 200 clients. Ended up being a lot of firing. And how do you do that legally? Which burns out a new grad who's like, bright eyed and like the world's great and there's no evil. Chances are that's not actually accurate. And so I was looking around. My brother-in-law, who's also a head of talent here in New York City, was like, hey, I know this company that's starting a recruiting agency. They're going to need to hire somebody. Go work for them. And so that kind of set me on the path of New York tech startups, which led me to actually my first in-house role at Compass, where they were a client of ours. And then went in-house and have never looked back to agency.
I always hear this. People go from agency in-house and never look back. I wonder why.
I've
been like, hey man, like what's wrong with agency?
It's so fascinating because like at different times in my career, I've looked back and been like, I should probably go back to agency. Like just was such a different, unique thing. And it was a lot of fun being able to hire for a variety of different companies. For me, kind of that HR background, I really want to see the life cycle of an employee. And so it's from start to finish, whether, they get promoted or move on from a company. I've kind of made my career on helping folks who are exiting a company land their next job. And so I think that's what's led me to stay in talent and HR in-house versus going back to an agency.
I kind of think about it similar to developers, right? There's certain developers that like working at an agency because they like to work on different projects. They'll be on something for, 3 to 6 months. They'll build something, they'll ship it, and then they'll move on to something else. And then, a lot of developers sometimes like they want to work on a product and build it over time, over many years, right? So I think I kind of see it similar, right? Like some people, they like that agency life and they like new things and different challenges all the time. Others like that continuity, right? So, maybe there's a parallel there. I want to stay with you, Miles, because you mentioned something to me. Now it's coming together. You worked for an HVAC company in your parents' company. You said you've been working since you were 12. And then you said something to me earlier on the pre-show about firing people at a young age. So can you just break it down? Like, how young were you? Like what was going on there?
Yeah. So I past life was also a manager of a Radio Shack, which most people who are going to listen to this or see this probably have no idea what Radio Shack was.
I am a former customer. I know.
Yeah. So that I was 18 and had to fire several employees there. And so that combined with like doing operations for the family business led into the excitement and want for HR. A lot of the companies we were working for were like small mom and pop shops where like high turnover. And so it was really, how do you process and fire people in a way that's, kind of covers the basis for the company. And so, or like workers' comp claims was another massive area of it. And so I was 20, 21 at the time. And so
just a pup.
Yeah. Firing folks who were, 3 to 4x my age.
Yeah.
And, I was clean shaven back then and wearing collared shirts and dress pants to work every day and getting on calls with folks who were, way more my senior and having to be like, hey, you're no longer a part of the company that you were at for the last 4 years. After about doing that, a dozen or so times, it started weighing on me.
Yeah.
So
it's got to be tough. Usually at that age, you're the one getting fired, not the one firing.
Right. Exactly.
Let's shift gears a bit to like moving forward. So I know, Anne, you mentioned on the jump, hiring is kind of like tapered off a little bit, but hopefully it's starting to pick up. Are you seeing growth in terms of hiring like in the next 12 months? And if so, like what areas? Is it sales? Is it engineering? Is it product? Is it somewhere else?
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, like last year, if I look at this time last year, things were steady. But I found that Carbon 6 specifically, we've always had intention to be fiscally responsible, to make sure that we are in a strong financial position to get us to that next stage of growth. And so we've always been very thoughtful and intentional how we want to hire, where we want to hire, what needs to be more focused. And if I didn't explain this earlier, which I don't think I did, Carbon 6 is a platform that provides an ecosystem of solutions for marketplace sellers to grow and scale in marketplaces like Amazon and beyond. And so, what's great about what our mission is that we recognize that e-commerce itself is an equalizer to anybody who, regardless of your background, your education pedigree, or your work experience, you can actually be your own entrepreneur, and we provide you the solutions on how to scale. So it's been really great to see how much, with what's happened in the pandemic, the impact it has to the e-commerce marketplace and how people shop online. And so it's allowed us to continue to ride this growth, but we're still being conservative about how we grow. And so when interest rates were rising last year and there were layoffs that were still happening, we were still actually growing. So we weren't competing with other offers that were presented to our candidates that we knew were essentially great assets to our mission and our vision of growth of where we want to see Carbon 6 in the future. So it was a really good time of like not having to compete. Fast forward today, and I would say in the last few months, it's been so much more competitive. We're seeing candidates get offers. I'm seeing my offer acceptance rate go down, and we're starting to uncover why that might be. But I think, the economy is starting to pick up. And so for us specifically, we've made 50 hires up to this point this year. I think we're going to be able to double total number of hires by the end of the year, but we're hiring across the board pretty equally. And it's a tribute to so many factors of like our growth in the industry, but also the needs to not only scale our product or our solution to our marketplace sellers, but also to make sure that these sellers in the marketplace are aware of our solutions. So we are building our go-to-market function to accelerate that growth and awareness. We've only been around for 3 years, but we've had such great traction of our brand and our presence in disrupting this industry. So it's important that we're staying ahead of providing the best solutions, but also enabling the teams to really bring us in a very competitive point of view and solution to the marketplace. So it's been really, really great to see the growth for us at Carbon 6, but it's also really interesting to now start to be in this competitive environment with other organizations or startups that are also competing for that same talent.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you had a good last year.
Yeah, it's been good.
You just work a little bit harder, like you just work. I know you're a great recruiter, so I don't think you'll have any issues. Miles.
Yeah, I was going to say it's to your point around like you're hiring for needs, not wants.
Yes.
I think it's like such a shift over the past few years that VCs dumped money and now they're not as dumping as much money. And so companies have to be fiscally responsible in a way that they weren't previously. Flip similarly has been that way from day one. And so, our engineers work probably more hours than an average engineer would. And we then decide like, okay, our hiring is going to scale as like they get more work. And if they're at a point where they're doing like 60 hours a week, let's hire another engineer. And so we're always thinking about this from like a needs and a dollar amount than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And so you both kind of mentioned the interest rates and inflation that kind of made companies change their philosophy a little bit around hiring. Did either of you, I mean, I'm sure you saw this, but what were some things that you saw change in terms of kind of the overall messaging and overall strategy as it relates to hiring as we're going through that interest rate period where it seemed like every couple months they were raising rates and making it harder for companies to grow? Maybe Miles, you want to start?
Yeah, I think like the biggest takeaway was like, okay, let's hire 5 AEs, right? Let's hire 6 and more engineers. It was okay, our runway and burn rate is X. If the course of the economy continues this trajectory, our burn rate's cut by 20%. So we actually need to not hire, maybe we were thinking about hiring 2 mid-level people. Maybe let's just hire 1 senior person. And so the strategy and what we hired for has shifted as we've kind of navigated this economic, not crisis, but like the economy at a whole.
Yeah, like the downturn.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anne?
Yeah, I can echo what Miles just said there. A lot of the conversations that we have when it comes to headcount planning and strategy is related to, can we hire one person that can not only be strategic, but also tactical? Because at the end of the day, we want to be continuously thinking about how do we be capital efficient, because we don't know where the economy is going to go. We've seen, the expansion, the contraction, expansion, contraction in such a short period of time. Like this is like within less than 3 years that we're asking people to wear multiple hats at this point, to the point where we actually, have more, I would say, confidence in the growth to be able to invest more specialized individuals in the areas that are needed in the business. So I'll give you an example. So when I started as the first recruiter at Carbon 6. And prior to that, I was managing a team of 9 direct reports, and I had a team for sourcing, a team for coordination, a team for recruiting, and then we're specialized in different areas within go-to-market. So it could be like 1 recruiter dedicated to just AEs, 1 recruiter just to BDRs. It was insane how money was easy to get and to get the resources and the tools to make a more robust tech stack to help you accelerate your growth in an organization. But when I joined, they need to build a recruiting function from the ground up. But not only that, within 3 months, they realized, oh crap, we're actually growing a lot, that we need someone to step in to help with HR. Now, I've never done HR before, but we weren't at the position to hire someone at a VP level at the time. So I was more than happy to step in alongside my VP of operations at the time, who was also stepping in to build the foundations of our HR function at Carbon 6, until we got to a point where we were ready to hire VP people, who actually just started three months ago, and she's doing incredible. But that was just the nature of one type of example that I've seen across the board in our organization. Now we're coming to the point where everyone's starting to have to specialize, because you can only do so much. It's not sustainable to do all the things and be really good at all the things. And then on top of that, we're actually seeing a shift of candidates in how they evaluate companies, because I know, Miles, you talked about runway. That's like also like something that candidates typically ask me, like, what's your runway? Because they're obviously, really conservative of the decisions that they make. It's not just about the company's mission anymore. It's not just about the people. It's about the long-term success and growth of the organization and how that impacts their personal and professional growth and development. And so we made a conscious decision that we wanted to achieve profitability. But when we did that, we also reevaluated how do we structure compensation packages. And you could see that a lot of people after a significant amount of layoffs that were happening in 22, that they didn't see the value of equity the same way they did during the pandemic or pre-pandemic time. Mm-hmm. And so we're having to have these conversations, because as tech valuations have undergone a reset over the past 2 years, employees have also reset their expectations about company equity and what that means to them. Mm-hmm. And so, when we respond to candidates about runway, we don't even talk about it, because we talk about, well, we're here in a strong financial position because we chose to be profitable. We chose to think about the longevity of our employees and the future growth of the company, which means that we're not, especially at Series A, going to offer the most competitive, but what are you weighing what's most valuable to you? And believe it or not, at that point in time, a lot of folks were, deciding between an offer that was a little bit more than what we offered, but they rather choose a company that was more stable and more secure, but still have the benefit and dynamic of a startup, if that makes sense.
Have you found that candidates are asking for the ability to wear multiple hats? Because I've noticed a little bit of a shift in that, of like, people don't want to necessarily be specialized anymore.
Yes, that's actually a really good point. Actually, so my personal story was that, Sean mentioned this earlier. We worked at Ada, and I was impacted by layoffs in the end of 2022. And what I realized was my function, even as a leader, I was specialized in go-to-market recruiting. And I knew that through conversations, through mentorship, that it's important that you are not specialized if you want to really develop and grow your career and have a number of opportunities available for you. So even when I came on board to Carbon 6, I knew that was a role. I knew that I was going to be the first recruiter. I wasn't so fussed on title. I was more focused on what is the value that I want to bring? What's the experience that I don't have under my belt? And it's building the entire function from the ground up across different parts of the organization, across operations and employer brand. And so when I speak to candidates and when I think about growing my team now versus when I grew it during the Great Resignation era, it's actually now not so much on the specialized area, but the ones that are differentiated as a candidate are the ones that have worn multiple hats, that have dabbled into different things, because they're more likely to thrive in an ambiguous environment, because they're not afraid to basically jump in and try different things. And to be honest with you, one of my favorite books I've read is called Range. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but it talks about that there's a benefit to being specialized, but there's also a really great benefit. And the most successful people are the most specialized generalists in their field, because they're able to jump in and have so many different diverse experience and multi-dimensional backgrounds to be able to jump into things that they've never done before. Because what I found when I was recruiting for my team, was that there were certain recruiters who just did not want to do, like, if they were specialized in tech recruiting, they did not want to do go-to-market recruiting, and it really limited themselves to be able to jump into an environment where, hey, the strategy is going to shift. One day it might be like a product-led company. If it's going to be product-led, we're going to double down on hiring for R&D. If it's a sales-led organization, we need to double down go-to-market. And you need to be flexible in this ever-changing environment to be more, I would say, advantageous to really making sure that you have like a very sophisticated toolkit to differentiate yourself in the market.
I couldn't agree more there. I think, especially for recruiters, as you're scaling a company, I think it's fine if you have like the thing you're excited about and passionate about and you're working on day to day, right? Like some folks, that's sales recruiting. For me,
yes.
I'm not a go-to-market recruiter. Like I'm born and bred tech recruiter. That's kind of where my career was built. But I'll do finance. I'll do marketing. I'll do sales, BDRs, whatever it takes to help scale a company. For folks who I'm hiring right now, I've told every single person, I'm like, okay, you're more of a go-to-market person, so we'll give you the go-to-market roles, but you are expected to work on one non-go-to-market role. Because like I want folks to have that growth and have that understanding of the full business, because I think that benefits whether you're trying a sales-led org. If you don't know what product's doing, you're not going to scale the company.
Yes. And honestly, I hope that person recognizes how great of a leader you are to put them in that position, because I tell team members that used to report to me that it's really important, if you're given an opportunity to work on something that you've never done before, take advantage of it. Like you saying that, you're really strong at tech recruiting. I'm jealous of that, because I could be better. And I think what's great about, because we were, as a talent function, the most impacted during the layoffs, we're such a tight community that people are willing to help and give you support of areas that you don't know when you're put in those uncomfortable positions. So it's great that we're so tight knit to just support each other in those days of uncertainty. Yeah.
It's interesting point both you bring up is, I would say 4 years ago, like a lot of clients that we had wanted like FANG engineers, right? Like, oh, we want someone from a FANG company. But I'm starting to feel like a switch, like a little short, like change and shift in the marketplace and the feedback we're getting, where it's like, well, the FANG engineers, they're very specialized, and they may be in a very narrow lane, and we want someone more general. So let's try to avoid FANG engineers. It's just an interesting kind of thing I've noticed over the last few years. I don't know if each of you have seen this or feel that way.
Sure.
Yeah, we typically don't go after FANG just because the dynamic of the environment is so different that it would be hard for them to thrive in a very unstructured environment. And we're really honest with candidates. Like I tell candidates all the time in the initial screens, and so does my recruitment team. It's like always better to just be upfront of like not just the great things that are happening at our company, but also the things that make it really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And, we really set the tone of like, if you're looking for structure, this is not the place. We're building a plane and flying at the same time. And some candidates are more than willing to just take a step back and walk away. And that's the best. You're self-aware of what you are looking for. And if we can have that honest conversation up front, then we're not like wasting time and over-investing in a process that isn't aligned on both parties.
I have something similar in my like pitch of like the good, the bad, the ugly of the role.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, that has led so many people to self-select out.
Yeah.
Like even on a call of like, we do 60 hours. Like, let me explain to you what 60 hours actually looks like and what you're going to do day to day. And then they go, yeah, I'm looking for something, a little bit later stage or a little bit more support or whatever it is. And I think with FANG, to your point, Anne, was right. You're like, you have to move desks in an office. You don't have another team that's going to come grab your computer and reset it up for you. You've got to do that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't like knock anybody who's coming from a FANG, like if they want to work at a startup, but I am more cognizant of what they've done and what they're looking to actually get out of this. The other thing that also I kind of try to stay away from FANG companies is compensation. And to our whole point of being fiscally responsible, they're going to make way more salary than we're going to be able to pay, especially at early stage. Now, if they want equity, we can talk, but like it's hard for us to compete with even Series A companies at our stage.
Mm-hmm. I totally hear that, and so it sounds like you're echoing what we've been seeing in the market over the last couple of years. Okay, so I really want to touch on both of your kind of lessons learned and experiences at Miles at Candid and Anne at Ada, because those are really extremely interesting kind of growth stories. So I'd love to kind of hear about when you started the company, what that looked like, and then how maybe your hiring strategy changed, or what are some of the things you learned from taking the company from sub 100 to over 400, and in Anne's case over 500. So Miles, why don't you tee this one off with Candid?
Cool. Yeah. So I started Candid as the 30th employee. We had specializations. I was tech. The other recruiter was kind of, GA, and we had our head of talent. We didn't have any HR folks, so we were all kind of doing a little bit of onboarding, a little bit of everything. Kind of hit virality of the product, and all of a sudden we were seeing great sales, and so saw a ton of sales.
And so just for the listeners' benefit, Candid, you're in like the clear braces.
Candid, yeah, so it's direct consumer clear aligners. So if you have braces, right, you have wired braces. The other way of doing it is like Invisalign or Smile Direct Club. Candid was born at that same thing as a fast follow to the Smile Direct Club. And so we were shipping clear aligners and helping folks scan their teeth to understand, can they actually use this product? All of it was done at home. And so if you think of it, it's more of like a beauty product than it is kind of a healthcare product. Mm-hmm. But there is teeth are important. So straight teeth, there's health benefits from it. And so we were kind of in this unique like beauty health space at the time. And so very popular, blew up. We ended up opening a office in Columbus, Ohio for customer support because of the tax incentives that we got. And there was a ton of, right, how do you hire fast? How do you hire a large group of types of folks, whether it's like engineering, sales, product. And so we tried to do that in a way that was somewhat fiscally responsible, but we also were like, we just need to hire so much so quickly. Let's just throw money at the problem. Mm-hmm. And we didn't, the lesson learned, I think, was we were trying to build this rocket ship as it was exiting orbit, but we didn't have any boosters on it. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it fell apart very quickly. And especially with COVID, folks are indoors. They're not on, Zoom. You can kind of keep your mouth closed and nobody cares what your teeth look like. So there was a lot of layoffs at the end there. The thing I think we thought about from a recruiting perspective was, how do you scale these things? Like, we started retail stores. I think if we looked back on it, I probably would have suggested not to expand into retail and stick with direct to consumer until we had proof of the business model of these stores working. Instead, we launched, I think, 8 to 10 stores in like a 3-month period. And so we had to hire a ton of folks around that concept of how do you build a store from scratch in 8 different locations within a short time frame. So all that's to say, lesson learned of overhiring. And I think like the market picked up relatively quickly afterwards on like, that's what kind of happens.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Anne, we got 5 minutes left, so you're going to take us home on this. Tell us a little bit about Ada. I mean, I experienced some of it, but I think I was gone for a lot of the big growth. So tell us kind of what happened. I know there were some layoffs around, the first wave of COVID. I was actually impacted at that point, but then soon after, Ada like really bounced back and went from like a sub 100 company to over 500. So
yeah,
tell us what happened, please.
So Ada is an AI-powered customer service automation platform. So it definitely had a great growth trajectory and expansion during the pandemic, because when people transition from shopping in store to shopping online, that was the AI-powered service that you would get on the corner of your browser to help you with any customer support requests. So it was an incredible time. Got to see it go from Series A to Series C, getting unicorn status, and we were growing so much. Like, I think it was like 60% of the hiring plan was go-to-market focus, which was what my team and I were owning, and the remaining 40% was all tech. And so I think we had on average between 50 to 60 hires a quarter, and so I had a team of 9, and the way I scaled them was, quite honestly, there was so much coordination. Like we're talking hundreds of candidates at every single stage. And with those amount of requisitions, it was really important to specialize the team in such a way that we had someone dedicated for coordination, someone dedicated for sourcing, someone dedicated for full like end-to-end recruiting. So once a sourcer would identify a candidate, would pass off to the recruiter and bring that candidate to the finish line. So it was a well-oiled, regimented machine. But I think at that point too was that money and resources were just so available that we can invest in building teams. We can invest in, sophisticated tools to help us with automating a lot of our manual work. But unfortunately, like most companies, especially in 2022, those companies that have aggressively hired during the pandemic were faced with the reality that the growth projections didn't match the reality of the macroeconomic climate. So they unfortunately made a difficult decision to restructure their organization and pivot the strategy. And so it was less focused on go-to-market, more focused on product and engineering, which made sense as to my impact. And I think that also made me more thoughtful about like the opportunity of being able to build an entire function from the ground up, even after knowing that I had just a very specialized area of function, like I mentioned. And so it was a very changing time at that point, but I think that I've been able to nail down exactly how to identify like some learnings from that experience to be able to focus on looking for more specialized generalists on my team that are not afraid to wear the multiple hats across end-to-end journey, from when a candidate comes into application or source to closing them and being part of the pre-onboarding. I used to be that, and this is embarrassing to admit, like back in the day when we were so specialized, I would say anything after pre-onboarding, that is all of HR. Now I know like it's an entire team function to see that life cycle from candidate to employee experience, that I think really differentiates how I think about building teams in the future, especially with the fact that we don't have all the resources that are available to us, but it makes you really thoughtful about how to be resourceful with what you have. And I think ChatGPT has really changed the game with helping us to accelerate a lot of the manual work, even when we don't have the size of team that we used to have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got 2 more minutes. So 60 seconds. Just one thing looking in the future about recruiting, whether it's tooling or anything like that. What's something you're super excited about as we kind of look forward to the next couple of years of recruiting? And you're up, so give me your answer, and then Miles, you'll take us home.
Yeah, I'm honestly personally excited about AI being able to identify high potential candidates better. We are guilty as human beings. There's errors in how we review profiles. I still review every single application manually, but I remember there was times where someone would external referral would recommend someone in their network who had recently applied. And when you look at their resume, you're like, I don't know, this doesn't seem like the right person to think about, but you want to give the courtesy. So when you have a call with that candidate and realize, oh my God, they're amazing. Like it just wasn't represented on paper well. Mm-hmm. And they don't have the direct experience in the role. Like, you look for certain titles, you look for certain experiences, but sometimes it's not about the actual direct experience, but the holistic experience that they can bring that provides a different perspective of what we should be looking for. And so we've had successful candidates who may not have the best resumes or the best natural linear progression in their career for a specific role. And I'm excited for AI to just help us identify those high potential candidates, because I think that those are opportunities for us to think about, what are the great people we should be thinking about in a more diverse way to hire for talent than the traditional way that we look at profiles.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you said that, because we've been doing this at Rocket and with Hireful for the last 7 years. So maybe it's something we can talk about offline if you're interested. Miles, what about you? What's something you're really excited about?
Yeah, I think I'd echo the AI. I think, I don't want to steal Anne's answer here. So the other part of this is kind of even before we get there, I think there's a ton of and I don't think we're there yet, but like a ton of interesting like outbounding and like employer branding stuff that AI will help tremendously with, that I haven't quite seen yet be done. Like, sure, I can run my emails through Grammarly or ChatGPT and it's going to help me be a better writer. But I think there's like automations there of like when you're, trying to message somebody, how do you actually message them to be specific to them versus like the standard, recruiter, like, hey, I saw you have insert X title at X company doing X thing. But like really in that sourcing kind of understand like, hey, I saw you wrote this article online about X thing. Like, that's the type of person we want to hire.
That sounds super exciting too. And, I think we're all excited to see what AI can do. It's definitely going to make a major impact and change the way we live. Like, it's going to change the entire world in the next
Totally.
5 to 10 years. So, and Miles, thank you so much. We're out of time, unfortunately. We could have gone. I think I only got through like 3 questions I had here, but you guys both brought it. I thank you both so much for your time. And for anyone listening, until next time, happy hunting. See you guys later.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.